Good morning, everyone. Petty Officer Romero here with Job Corps. We're talking more. This has been the longest series that I've done, but there's a lot of equipment. If you remember in the first training video about equipment, there was a belt, and that belt had a radio. It had OC spray, cuffs, a baton, taser, maybe. Tons of things that a security officer might use, and most everything a police officer will have. Matter of fact, I often think to myself, how can they even move? You know, this is just some personal feelings, but when they have their bulletproof vest on underneath their shirt, and if you've ever worn them, while technology has improved and they're thinner, they're more flexible, they're still burdensome. And then whenever you throw on that belt, as you can see in the pictures here, like, I don't know how they sit in their car. But the point is that it's very difficult. And as a police officer, a lot of stuff is required. As a security officer, I mentioned in one of the videos, I think either the first or second, that was this one security guard that we kind of used as an illustration in a YouTube video. He kind of felt like he went a little overboard in everything that he needed in that position. But having said that, I don't know what position he was in. Maybe he was in a tactical security position where he needed to have all that equipment. It's just those jobs are I don't want to say, there's just not that many of them. So I'm always reluctant when I see somebody dressed like that to have that type of equipment. But you also want to make sure and keep in mind that, yeah, having all that equipment might sound great, but if something goes down, and we've talked about this too, you know, not being a tough guy and running away. If you have 20 pounds of equipment on you and you trying to get out of there because there's 3 guys about to attack you, and you carrying 25 pounds of equipment, see how fast you'll be able to run with that stuff on. So it is my advice to you to keep the minimal amount of equipment that you need on a regular basis on you. It's really no point in having stuff that you never use, and based on the type of job that you have, you will never use, or the chances of using, because the thing is, there's always a chance, but there just comes a point when it's excessive. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and talk about the handcuffs and the baton. So what I'm going to do first is start you guys in on a handcuff training video. And at some point, we're also going to do this live practical so that you guys can actually get accustomed to using handcuffs and how they apply. So here we go.
Hey, this is Major Alex Payne, Jeffersontown Police Department, and it's good to be with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about handcuffing and handcuffing procedures, a little bit about handcuff techniques, and some high points in the area of handcuffing that you need to be familiar with when you're applying these things. First off, only use restraining devices that you have been properly trained in. And that doesn't only apply to your steel handcuffs, but also to your flex cuffs. If you use anything like that, you need to receive the proper training in proper application, and more importantly, proper removal before you actually go out and use these restraining devices in your line of work. One of the other things I like to remind you of about your cuffs, they are a tool and they need maintenance just like any other tool on your belt. So occasionally pull these things out, make sure that they operate smoothly, they're capable of being oiled in the hinges. Take care of them just like you take care of any other piece of equipment on your belt. Another thing, there's a lot of different types of handcuffs out there. Normally people will carry a set of chains, which basically are just a chain link in between 2 sets of bracelets. Another type of handcuff would be a rigid cuff, which actually locks in the middle. You're starting to see a lot of those come out now. And another type of handcuff, which we're going to use today, I'm going to show you a particular technique with, is a hinged cuff. And it's my recommendation that you carry a set of chains and a set of hinges, because they each have applications that you will find very useful in the field, especially when it comes to individuals who are trying to slip cuffs, which we'll get into in just a little bit later. As far as a use of force, you always want to document when you handcuff somebody on camera, if you have those, if you have body cams, if you have in-car cameras, turn and talk to that camera and tell the camera, tell the body cam, just talk to yourself that these cuffs have been, number one, checked for tightness, and number two, double locked, okay? That means that the cuffs, you've actually asked the individual or checked on the individual by running the tip of your little finger in between that single bar in their wrist and seen that you've had enough room where the individual is still comfortable yet still properly restrained. The second thing is that you've double locked those handcuffs. The important part about double locking a handcuff is that that single bar will no longer rotate around and cause any undue tightness or undue injury to someone that you have handcuffed. Because remember, once somebody is in handcuffs, once you have control, then that individual's safety is your personal responsibility. So now we'll just step back just a little bit and we'll take a look at a particular cuffing technique that's called a stack with a set of hinge cuffs. And I think you'll find this very useful. This is my friend Mr. Troy Pitcock at the Kentucky League of Cities Insurance Services. I'm going to be using Troy as a training dummy. That's not to imply that he is a dummy. I'm just going to be using him as a training dummy. And Troy's an old retired policeman, and he's going to help us out today. One of the things that I want to tell you about handcuffing is a voluntary procedure. That means that if Troy doesn't want to be handcuffed right now, then I've got to use other things to impress upon him that handcuffing is not so bad. We never want to wrestle anyone into handcuffs. That's where we get injured. So the individual that I'm trying to handcuff, there has to be some cooperation there. Because if there is no cooperation, if there is no compliance, handcuffs are the wrong tool to have in your hand. And I hope everybody understands that. Now, speaking of when do you grab this thing? When you position this individual the way you want to position them, and that can be a lot of different ways. It's not just in a sterile environment of a gym where everybody can turn around and put their hands back properly and do all that other good stuff. A lot of these people are under the influence of drugs or under the influence of other intoxicants, and so you're just going to have to muddle your way through it. But there are some basic principles about how you want to apply these cuffs and do it properly and make it safe for both the individual you're handcuffing and you and the other officers as well. And always remember, cuff first, search second. And now we'll get into a technique. At a minimum, you want this individual to turn around and not look at you, and you do not want a set of handcuffs in your hand until you have an individual in this particular position. One thing that I've always told people to do, if you can mask the snap of your handcuff pouch and the clinking around of the handcuffs with your voice, you're that much better off. Reason being, when you hear that snap and you hear the rattle of handcuffs, these people have ears too. And if they're going to bolt or if they're going to try something, that would be a good time to do it. So if you cover that action with the sound of your voice, you could be a little bit better off. You play the percentages when you handcuff. Most people are right-handed, the vast majority of people, so I want to handcuff or get a set of cuffs, one cuff, on this right hand first and foremost. And I want to do that as quickly and cleanly as possible. So whatever kind of cuffs that you have, whether they be hinges, whether they be chains or rigid cuffs, you need to establish a proper grip. For me, on this set of hinge cuffs, this is a proper grip. How can I tell? I can actually take my index finger and work the single bar around, and it moves smoothly and freely without coming into contact with my hand that's holding the handcuffs. It's also a very stable position where I can apply it. There's nothing wobbling around, and I know these things are ready to go. So, grip. I've attained the cuffs, I have the grip. Now I want to get the individual into as good a cuffing position as I can. Ideally, if they're sober enough and they can obey your verbal instructions, the first thing that I would have them do is put their hands back towards me, palm up, and you'll see Troy demonstrate that right there. If I can get this, I'm way ahead of the game. If I can't, then I've actually got to go up, where the individual is too intoxicated to hear my instructions or what have you. Again, you're going to muddle your way through this, but I'm going to do this as best case scenario right here, and this individual is complying. We'll save the non-compliant people for another day. As I make my approach, one of the things that I always like to do is just touch them, because most of your interaction or their violence is going to happen at first touch. And I do that with a reason. I'll have this set of cuffs up here, and I'm just going to give them a quick touch to see how they react. He may bolt, he may try to do something, but either way, I'm ready for it. And that's what they're waiting on, is first touch. So maybe after I give them a little touch, and it can be anywhere, give them another little verbal command. But it needs to bend over at the waist for me, bring those hands back higher for me, just a little bit higher. May give them a little touch here. This is ideal for me. What I want to do now is that as I move in, I want to prepare to apply this cuff quickly and efficiently. There's a couple different ways to do that, but I'll do it real easy right here. Where basically I'm just going to make this movement, okay, with his hand and the wrist right in between it. And what happens when I do that, right at first touch, this single bar is applied. I can then have this thumb as a grip, and I can turn him over and do whatever I want with it. I'm just going to take this arm and shove it right here toward the small of his back. I'm going to hang on to his thumb and ask him to stand up at the same time. Please stand up, sir. And as he stands up, I meet him with the arm. Troy, bend back over at the waist, please. Extend your arm. This is the first position. Here we are. Notice I want to kind of be at an angle right here. And when I do this, I'm going to ask him start standing up for me, please, sir. And as I do that, look, I just put that normal bend right there in his arm. I'm going to grab it by the fingers, which is a very important point. I do not want to get into a handshake grip with this individual because he can't shake my hand, Troy. He can grab me, and now here we are. So that's not a good point. If I grab him by the fingers, however, it's hard for him to get a grip. Okay. Now, as I do that, I'll just simply bring his wrist up to this next cuff, push down and pull up with the wrist, and this is what you call a stack. Now, the next thing that you'll do, just like I told you earlier in the video, you're going to check for tightness and double lock. The beauty about this position is that it is very, very, very hard to slip. If you'll remember, we've had officers, and we've had an officer this year, unfortunately, who was killed by an individual who was in the back seat of his car, who slipped his cuffs. That took him from behind his back to the front and went through and actually killed the officer. This is what hinge cuffs are for people that you think are escape risk, maybe who you've dealt with before, maybe who are real ultra flexible, ultra thin, skinny, that you think may have a good chance of slipping the cuffs. This is what this particular technique is called. It's a stack. So if you don't have it, get yourself a good set of hinge cuffs. Practice this technique. It's easy, easy, okay? Just make a few reps, and I'm telling you, you'll be safer because of it. If you have any questions, get a hold of Mark or Troy or me. We'll be happy to answer them. Thanks. What we have here is a set of chain cuffs that pretty much everybody across the country has, and I want to establish a proper grip with a set of chains for the technique that you're about to see. Again, I come in with a pistol grip and establish that grip on the top cuff. On the bottom, I want that single bar facing to my left, which is this, okay? This is going to set me up for what's called a bottom load. This first cuff will go on, the second cuff will come from the bottom, okay? We call that a bottom load. And that'll be the technique that you're about to see. But again, it's very important that the grip be stable and firm to properly apply the cuffs. Again, at first touch, first cuff goes on, okay? Turn this thumb to the outside, I'll come over, I'll ask for their hand, I'll grab the fingers. Would you please start standing up for me, sir? This cuff comes in, I'll actually make contact with the wrist, I'll touch them. I'm not gonna slam this on. I wanna make contact, push down, and pull up with the cuff. That second cuff goes on smooth. And now, I'm in this position where I can check for tightness and double lock, okay? That's a bottom load, okay? Very, very common technique. Hey, just want to make a point with you before you start your training. And again, things you learn through experience. Before you start training, make sure your handcuff keys actually work in your handcuffs, because you do not want to find out when these cuffs are actually on your training partner that your handcuff keys no longer work. These things are tools, they can break. You especially see the little post inside these handcuffs. That's one thing to make sure that you have in there. If that post is missing, you need to get a new set of cuffs, because that's actually what that hole in that handcuff key goes around. And for you guys that use these great big Magnum handcuff keys, those things put a lot of torque on the posts in these handcuffs, and they can get broken. And if it breaks, man, you're going to be taking a trip to your local mechanic to get these things off. So before you start training, make sure your handcuff keys work before you start cuffing people up. Let me point out here real quick, my training partner here, Troy, is a healthy individual. And that reminds me of some of the exceptions that we may have to applying cuffs. If you have individuals that are handicaps, that may be something you have to consider. That they have some type of medical issue that you may have to come up with some inventive ways to secure maybe what appears to be their only good hand. And if you have to take a cuff, put it on a wrist and attach the rest to a belt, we all have had situations where we've had to improvise. But there are some times, and use common sense, let that be your guide, where you may not want to apply cuffs because of an existing injury, they're elderly, handicapped, whatever. Just as long as you've got a really, really, really good reason for somebody that you're going to arrest, that you're not going to put cuffs on, okay? But just work your way through it, adapt and overcome.
All right, there you go. Applying handcuffs. We'll do a practical exercise when we get back to on campus, and we'll practice applying handcuffs and things like that. Let's see here. We also move forward to the baton. Now, let's see here. Okay, the baton is you don't see the baton used to be used much more frequently when before the taser came into play. But obviously, for a baton to be effective, you have to hit somebody with it. So I think that and this really isn't a statistical thing, but it's just based on my observations. If you pull that taser out, that taser can incapacitate somebody without doing serious harm. Again, I always have to say, yes, there are always exceptions, but for a baton to be really effective, you have to hurt somebody. So I think that the taser has kind of almost taken the place of the baton in the escalation of force, because it's just, to get into pulling a baton out and start beating somebody with it, that there's a lot to that's difficult. And I'm just, all these thoughts are going through my head, and I don't know if anyone wants to sit there and beat on somebody with a baton. It's just something about it. And then, too, when you're finished beating on somebody with a baton, if they were fighting back and you had to continue to do it, man, when that person comes through, whatever, if they were intoxicated or whatever, when you taking pictures of this person and they're beaten to a pulp all over their legs and thighs and biceps, and it doesn't look good for you. So one good blast from a taser, generally speaking, because again, there's always exceptions to that, but one good blast from a taser and the person's down, you handcuff them, they end up with two dots that look like it hurt, but that's the only thing on them that looks bad, to where getting into a baton altercation, I don't know, it seems a bit much to me. So I'm going to start with just some I guess I'm going to start with the training one. Then there's another video, it's about 2 or 3 minutes, and it just talks about your just tips. So here we go.
Rob Pincus here for Cops Plus and SWAT Magazine. Today we're going to talk about expandable batons. Now, when I first got started in law enforcement as a reserve deputy, Monadnock had already established itself as the go-to leader when it came to side-handle batons or straight batons for subject control or even personal defense. Of course, today there are many names in the industry, many names in the field, and many quality products out there that are available to you. This particular product is made by Monadnock, and it's their classic friction lock expandable baton. It's available in several sizes that are appropriate for on-duty use or even personal defense in many areas. Many people choose to carry an expandable baton as an intermediate level of force between unarmed and the use of a firearm, or in place of a firearm in places where they can't actually carry one for personal or family defense in a public environment. When you carry an expandable baton, of course, on duty, you're carrying it inside of some type of a breakaway holder or a sheath that requires you to pull the baton up before deployment. If you're carrying it for personal defense, it may be in a back pocket, it may be in one of those sheaths, maybe in some type of a case or holder that mounts it horizontally, or just tucked into your waistline underneath of a pullover. Either way, if you want to use it to its maximum potential, you're probably going to deploy it or expand it when you remove it from wherever you're carrying it before you actually use it against that person who's trying to hurt you or against that combative subject that you're actually going to try to control. Let's talk about how that deployment is best done. When we come up out of that sheath, out of the pocket, or we break out of our holder, what we don't want to do is flail the baton far out from our body. When we flail the baton far out from our body, we get into a lot of trouble real quick. First and foremost, we might not actually get the baton fully expanded the way that we want to because of objects in our environment. Very rarely are we just standing in the middle of an open parking lot with no one else around us, no vehicles, no people, and of course the combative subject himself, who may be coming on top of us as we deploy the stick in that environment. could foul the draw, could foul the deployment or the expansion of that baton and keep us from being able to use it the way that we actually intend to and the way that we train to use it. In a worst case scenario, we might even strike someone that we don't mean to when we're deploying the baton if we do it wildly, including that partner that may be standing right behind us. If we think of that bag as a potential partner, when I deploy this baton, if I were to flail it out as I expand it, I could actually strike the person behind me who's supposed to be helping me as I'm thinking about getting ready to defend myself from this person here who's actually much closer when I flail this baton wildly. Now I'm going to close. Let's take a look at how we would actually like to deploy the expandable baton whenever possible. We want to come up out of our sheath, breakaway holder, pocket, wherever we're carrying it, and keep the baton very close to us. We can actually deploy the baton parallel with our leg and not need any extra clearance than we've already got with the bulk of our shoulders or our vest or whatever else we have on our person. If we keep the deployment of the expandable baton within that cylinder that we're already taking up in our world, we're not likely to bump into walls, cars, or other people. So when I come up, I'm simply going to rotate my wrist quickly and snap in a downward motion and expand the baton right here next to my leg as parallel with my leg as possible. That gets me my full expansion. Now we want to bring the baton up as close to our body as we can and set it right here in our chamber. The chamber, the ready area, keeps the base of the baton very close to our shoulder. What this allows us to do is actually use this as a shield now, putting the baton up in front of us, holding it canted off to the side so that it will deflect any close coming attack. It allows us to quickly sweep it in front of us to block an attack coming from another side, or of course it allows us to be prepared to strike as efficiently as possible. And when we think about striking with the baton, of course, we're not thinking about striking to the head, which could be lethal. We're thinking about striking to the upper arms, to the front of the arms, to the hands if someone's trying to hurt us or they have some type of a tool that we're trying to disable their ability to use, or possibly striking down low to the legs, again to disable, to cause distraction so that we can then take control of that subject or escape in a personal defense situation. Possibly also using this as an intermediate gap to go to another type of defensive tool such as a taser or maybe even a firearm if we are in this situation we realize that our threat is actually lethal. By keeping the baton in close to our body, keeping the base of it in close to our shoulder, we make it very unlikely for someone to be able to get in between us and the baton. If they get in between us and the baton, it's very hard for us to use it, certainly for us to use its full potential. So we want to keep it in very close. And what this is going to allow us to do then is to generate power from our hips and arm extension and shoulder rotation so that as we come around, we can come around and generate a lot of force and a lot of speed at the end of the baton without needing to come way back here. If I come way back here, it gives this person much more time to realize what's going to happen, gives them the opportunity to interfere with this swing, block my arm, block the movement of the stick, or even come in and hurt me before I get to put this out in front of me as some type of shield. On the other hand, if I'm right here with the baton and I strike this way, right away, this baton is now forming a block. This baton is now forming a shield for me. When someone comes in to attack, it's much less likely they're going to be able to hurt me. They're going to run right into this flat metal surface as they come forward. And of course, if they don't get their block up, if they shield themselves, if they decide to take their attack back, which is exactly what I want, I'm now going to come in, strike them in their upper arm, strike them in their forearm, or possibly if they come up high, strike them in their torso, again, trying to cause some distraction, some disablement so that I can take control of the situation. Again, I deploy down parallel to my leg, I bring the baton up very close to my body, chamber, rotate, and strike. I could, of course, do the same thing down low. I could come up here, get into my chamber, decide to strike for the leg as I'm covering up here, and come down and strike. All of this happens very close to the body. When you use a baton to control a combative subject, you don't want to flail out wide and let them interrupt it. Take full advantage of your opportunity to strike from within, and of course, if you need to, strike straight out. You can also use the base of this baton as your striking surface and not need any rotation whatsoever to simply come forward and strike here. Now that's not nearly as much power, but that is a lot more impact than simply shoving someone to push them away. We might even use that attack to create space so that we can rechamber, come in, and get our full power strike. The Baton Classic Friction Lock Baton is a great option for on-duty use or personal defense, but if you do have one of these, make sure you train to use it as efficiently and properly as possible.
All right, let's take a quick look here at this this other video.
All right, man, take a seat. Buckle up. Ordinarily, we'd start with orientation of the car here, but we got calls pending, and we got to get to them. So, we're rolling. We're going to have to learn on the way. All right, today I set the car up. Pro tip, when things start going wrong, and we go to the riot baton, a lot of guys who don't know any better will put their hand through the leather thong and twist it around to lock their hand onto the baton. While this will lock the baton onto your hand and keep people from being able to just take it away from you, the problem that you have is that if somebody tries to pull you, grabs a hold of the baton and tries to pull you into an angry crowd, you're locked into the baton. You can't get away from it. You're going with it unless you're lucky and the thong breaks, which these things are pretty strong. There is a better way. Talk to your old timers who've actually dealt with riots, and they'll tell you what you do is put your thumb up like this, hang the baton and the thong from the back of your hand so the baton hangs below your hand. Then all you have to do is rotate your hand forward and the baton's locked onto your hand. Now you can try to pull this out of the hand, but even if I'm not holding onto the baton, you can see that it's locked in. I can easily just re-grasp it. So even if you slip, it's going to stay on. But if someone grabs a hold of the baton and tries to drag me away with it, all I have to do if I feel like I'm getting overpowered and I want to let the baton go is let go of my hand, straighten my fingers, and the baton comes right off. It'll keep you from getting dragged into an angry crowd. From another angle, your hand through the thong in the back of your hand, turn, grasp the baton. From another angle, hand straight up like you're giving somebody a handshake, hang the baton from the back of the hand, turn, and grasp the baton. Well, if you like that video, go ahead and subscribe, because there's a whole lot more to come. As soon as I finish up these calls, go 10-8.
All right, there you go. Cool little tip for the baton. All right, so I actually put together or found some really cool equipment, and I thought at the end of this video I would go ahead and put some a video of like things that you'll rarely ever see and rarely ever use, but kind of call it extreme police equipment. All right, so now we take a look at some of these extreme police vehicles, equipment or whatnot. So let me find it here for you, get it started. All right.
Insane law enforcement vehicles. But first, thanks for leaving us this comment on our unbelievable discoveries in the South Pacific video. We'll be sure to rock on, and you guys can keep expecting great, unique videos from us. We won't let you down. Number 10, U.S. Standard Police Car. To start this video, we thought it'd be a good idea to show you how your average day police car looks like in the U.S. Most of these vehicles are well equipped to handle high-speed pursuits and also answer routine calls. Traditionally, the U.S. only uses American-made vehicles such as Chevy, Dodge, and Ford, although there are a few exceptions. This photo here, taken of the Chicago police, is a good example of Chevy Tahoes being used. In general, standard cop cars aren't always easy to spot, since the models that they use are used also by civilians. Cop cars in France, for example, seem to generally take this shape and are less intimidating. Each paint scheme in the U.S. is generally determined by the jurisdiction. Standard equipment in each vehicle in the U.S. includes a 12-gauge shotgun, a radio, a flashlight, a dashboard cam, and a bad guy in the back seat. Number 9. Humvee police cars. Now you know what the standard police car here in the US is like, it's time to show the crazier stuff. Humvees were mass-produced, especially to be used in the wars in Iraq. With somewhat of a surplus of these vehicles, the police have decided to slowly start adding them to their fleets. With more rugged terrains in the state of Colorado, the city of Lone Tree and Central City added a few of these. This photo here shows a Hummer being used in the city of Highland Hills in Ohio. This one here appears to have been donated from a National Guard, and not bought with taxpayer money. This one here was used by one of the county sheriffs in Texas. With 700 horsepower and a V8, you don't want to mess with Texas or this Humvee. Some of these Humvees, like you see here, are even used as police cars in China. Number 8. Salinas Armored Truck. This massive armored truck was donated from the military to the Salinas Police Department in California. The tank-like vehicle is worth $650,000 and can provide armored protection against bombs, rifle, and pistol fire. Although it was technically a donation and not from city payer money, the upkeep and maintenance of this thing has a heavy price tag, and someone is going to have to pay for it. Number 7. Bulletproof Patrol Car. In an effort to make patrols a little safer for police in the US, they began to develop bulletproof materials for standard patrol cars that can withstand shots from armor-piercing rounds. Here in this photo, we see the types of ammunition used during the testing process in Michigan. For security reasons, they didn't say exactly which caliber it wasn't able to withstand, but due to the materials it's made from, my guess would be that it can stop a shot from an AK-47. The car's doors are fitted with ballistic panels that have 2 layers of Kevlar. This was fired at close range with many different weapons, including high-powered rifles like you see here. Number 6. The MRAP. In our most expensive military machines video, we mentioned how MRAPs were making their way from the battlefield and into the hands of law enforcement. These extremely well-armored, mine-resistant vehicles are not only extremely powerful, but also intimidating. They can withstand the blast of a Claymore mine. When riots began to get out of control in Ferguson, Missouri, the St. Louis County Police sent out this MRAP in response to shots being fired. The MRAPs have apparently become highly demanded by police departments in recent years, which almost makes you believe they're preparing for a full-scale breakdown of society or something. Between 2012 and 2014, over 465 cities in the US have requested to add one of these to their fleet. With each one costing about $500,000 each, it's going to take a little bit for your department to get one of these. You better believe, though, that the FBI got their hands on one of these. In order to receive an MRAP, the jurisdiction must meet certain requirements, such as shootings and also SWAT operations. The loudspeakers, heavy fuel requirements, and emergency lights can easily set them back an additional $70 grand. This MRAP that you see here on the left was dispersed during the Dakota pipeline riots and is actually equipped with a sound cannon that will emit a horrifying eardrum bursting noise that many compare to as being loud as a jet taking off. Number 5. Doraville Police Vehicle. Cities who have more police shootings and drug problems might have good reasons to obtain military-grade vehicles, but why would the small town of Doraville, Georgia be able to obtain such a massive beast? This thing is completely capable of plowing through walls and running over cars with ease. This little suburb of Atlanta didn't have one murder from 2010 to 2013, and a population of roughly 8,000 people. The chief of police claimed the vehicle had been a valuable tool for public safety. A video online of the SWAT team was posted in 2009 showing the vehicle's sheer force. This appears to be an M113 armored vehicle which has been used as far back as Vietnam, although their website doesn't appear to show too much specifics on what kind of vehicle it is, or if they still have it. During the Obama administration, he attempted to ban tracked vehicles for police, but most MRAPs that we saw in number 6 don't even have tracks. Number 4. The Rook. So what vehicle do police use when they're about to conduct a siege on a 2-story building? They call in the Rook. This vehicle, described by its manufacturers, is 6 tons of pure responsive force. For $250,000, the Rook can bring in 4 SWAT team members, close enough to someone's 2nd-story window, with the security of steel armor. The extendable platform can reach up to 11 feet, and they mostly use this in case of a big standoff with police, where they believe the suspect is armed. It's almost like a bulldozer that's used to shield the SWAT team. If it wanted to, we're sure it could flip over cars and destroy your house as well. It has a few special features such as cameras, gun ports, dual joystick controls, and air conditioning. Number 3. Water cannon vehicles. Riots have been getting out of control lately, so law enforcement figures that maybe if we hose them down a little bit, they'll get mad that they're dripping wet and go home. Recently, in the city of Calais, France, police have begun to bust out water cannons when violent clashes with migrants and activists break out. The water cannons are pretty high-powered, but don't seem to be quite as bad as getting pepper sprayed. These are basically like fire trucks that police use for riots. Other types have been made that would actually add electricity to the stream of water and potentially taser the entire group. In South Korea, some agencies added pink dye to the mix to help them mark the rioters, making it easier to make arrests. This one here from Germany costs about $1 million each, and the German government ordered 78 of them. Each one is made of steel and weighs 33 tons. It's capable of firing 22 liters of water per second. What do they plan on using all these vehicles for? Number 2. UH-1 helicopter. With the surplus of military vehicles, it makes more sense for those to get put to use by the police, right? They seem to be able to get away with it by labeling them as donations. And here you can see a case where a military-grade helicopter conducting a search and rescue operation was donated to the Milford, Connecticut Police Department in 2011. This former Army helicopter was given a new paint job to look more police-like. The helicopter is worth about $1 million. It's now equipped with a spotlight for catching bad guys at night. This was donated to a city with 52,000 people and a crime rate 68% lower than the rest of Connecticut. Police claim that criminals have changed their ways and they need this to stay one step ahead of the game. And number 1, police drones. Don't you feel safer with some police drones flying around the sky? The next time you think about committing some criminal behavior in your backyard, you better think twice. Thanks to advancements in drone technology, police can have more eyes in the sky than ever before. This has rose to popularity in Britain, especially in London and along the English Channel. Residents have apparently gotten fed up with the drones there, and there were over 900 complaints over the phone in the year 2015. Similar to undercover vehicles, the drones are rarely marked, and there's usually no way of knowing if it's a cop or not. As of right now, there are some laws on where people are able to fly drones, and this may restrict cops from catching on to the idea. With advanced cameras, night and thermal vision, these could really become a force to reckon with.
All right, there you go. All kind of cool militaristic vehicles that are being implemented in the standard police forces. Some of them, like the guy pointed out, like what in the world do you need it for? With the things going on in 2020. It seems like these type of vehicles, like the water truck, could be used for multiple things, dispersing riots and putting out all the fires. So interesting stuff, and I kind of threw that in there just so that you guys had some something cool to watch. So anyway, for Job Corps, Petty Officer Romero, we'll see you on the next video.